This podcast is a proud member of the Unidentified Network.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, live and in color, it's Mr. Wayne Lovejuice.
The other day I produced a Louis, had a chat with an interesting chappie who said that the YouTube algorithm really aren't that happy. If a channel only broadcasts once a week, so we decided we could text ya whenever we've got a piece of news in our new book on the track Xtra. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of On the Track Extra. My name is Jon and Ve. I'm the director of the Centre for Fortean Zoology, and in the co-pilot seat here is Flying Officer McCrinnan, who has been flying sorties over enemy lines while wearing a hat that makes him look like Viv Stanshall. Good evening, Mr. McCrinnan.
Hurrah! Good evening, Mr. Dance.
Today we're going to be talking about the latest issue of the magazine of the Butterfly Conservation Charity. It's got a lovely picture of a resting male orange tip. Now, I've been supporting butterfly conservation for 14 years now, ever since my dear late wife gave me a subscription, an ongoing subscription as a birthday present. And I recommend it to all of you. What do you think about butterflies, Mr. McCrinnan?
I love them. And yes, I love them. And I quite like moths as well, although there's not really a very clear distinction. There seems to be this sort of distinction, a bit like the one between dragonflies and damselflies. You know, with regard to dragonflies, the wings stick out sideways, and with damselflies, they can fold them. There seems to be, well, I used to think that there was a distinction between butterflies and moths in that regard, but I've been reading about these species, and I've discovered in this book that there's no such distinction.
Butterflies are a family of moths. So all butterflies are moths, but only a very few moths are butterflies. Does that help?
Oh, yes.
Before we started, you were telling me something very interesting about the word butterfly.
Oh, yes. Yeah, back in the, I'm not sure which century it was. I think it was the 18th or 19th century. Some scholar at one of the university, I think it was Oxford, decided that they were going to go through the English language, put all the words in a book, and essentially reevaluate the words. And when he came to when he came to flutterby, which was what these creatures that we call butterflies were called, up until that point, when he came to flutterby, he thought, oh, well, that doesn't sound very scientific, does it? A flutterby. That sounds rather whimsical. That's not good. Oh, I know. Let's reverse the first letters and call them butterflies. That sounds much more scientific, doesn't it? And then he reversed them, and then people began to learn. People and educated people began to call them butterflies, and then they put that into all the literature, and then that filtered down, and now everybody calls them butterflies when in fact they're flutterbys. And I prefer the name flutterby myself. It's quite poetic, isn't it?
I believe that another name for them was Aurelias, which it means spot
Aurelius.
gold, because so many of the butterflies, particularly the small tortoiseshell, have little golden specks on their chrysalids. And fancifully, if you see one of the yellow butterflies, like a clouded yellow or a brimstone flashing past at the corner of your eye, it looks like a little flash of gold. And those who collected and studied butterflies were known as Aurelians. Yeah, when she was a student, my stepdaughter Shosh has a friend called Aurelia, who I was very fond of. And I remember telling her about Aurelians being butterflies, and she was really rather chuffed by that. But what we're here for today is to look at the contents of the new issue of the Butterfly Conservation magazine, which is called Butterfly. Now, what I like about this, it's a mixture of people's observations and hard science, which I think is great. And it starts off with an article which is not credited at the moment, as far as I can see, an article about the new National Biodiversity Network Atlas, and underlines the point that data, is it data or data? I know it's data in Star Trek.
I prefer data. That sounds more scholarly to me.
Okay, the data is the most important thing when you're studying natural history. In fact, data is the most important thing when you're studying anything, because basically the point of study is to gather more data and expand the boundaries of human knowledge. But she points out that data is absolutely paramount, and this new National Biodiversity Network Atlas is going to help make thousands upon thousands upon thousands of records of all sorts of creatures available to those who want to study them. Well done, guys. Now what do we have?
Wow.
Oh,
Fabulous. Very well done.
This is now something that is really quite cryptozoological. Let's see if you can see the moth that I'm holding up.
Coastal moth moves
inland. You've got a micromoth called Ectodemia erythrogenella, which feeds on bramble. And until recently, it's only ever been found on the coastal plain in southern and southeastern England. But now, for totally unknown reasons, but this is the sort of thing that I find totally fascinating, it's moving inland.
So the non-indigenous stick insects are going to have a bit of a challenge for their food.
Oh, yes, and also because bramble is one of the most important foods for all sorts of insects. But I think it's one of the big lessons that we as cryptozoologists ought to learn, is that biotopes are not static. Animals will move from one biotope to another, from one geographic location to another. And that's why, again, going back to data is so important, because we can see how things change and how environments change and how the animals that live within them change. And that is a big, big object lesson for cryptozoology. So well done, guys. I'm really excited by that.
It could have an impact on agriculture too, for people who produce rosaceous species products like raspberries and blackberries and rose hips
and roses.
Because I would have thought so. I would have thought they might eat rose leaves because they're rosaceous species, aren't they?
Then it's got to be said, I had some stick insects, I can't remember the species, which thrived on bramble. When I tried putting them on domesticated roses,
Mm.
they turned their noses. I don't know if stick insects have noses. They turned their noses up at it and refused to eat it, which is very peculiar. I've never understood
I would
why.
imagine it would be I would imagine it would be because of the oils, because um, roses produce rose oil in their sap, which other rosaceous species don't produce.
I
So that
didn't
would
know
probably
that.
be what it is. It's as you know, rose oil is very, very fragrant. It's used in all sorts of perfumes.
You know what I want to do now? I'm going to try and get some I want to get stick insects this year anyway, because I want to give them to Gwyn's two little boys. But I'm going to try, because I've got wild roses in
Mm.
the garden. I think I'm going to try them on wild roses, see if they're any more impressed
Mm.
with wild roses than they were with domesticated. That's what I love about natural history.
Well,
There are experiments ongoing.
I would have thought that the wild roses produced the oil as an insecticide to as a protection against things like moths that might eat them. Um, and I would imagine that when they came into cultivation, one of the things that people liked about the roses that they were breeding them for was one was the flower, but the other was the scent. And of course, the scent comes from this rosaceous oil. So that's probably why they have more of this oil in them. And then um, that goes back to these moths, why they wouldn't like the cultivated roses. Um, and they might not like the wild roses because the wild roses probably do have some of that rosaceous oil in them. Um, but it'd be quite nice if you could do raspberries, blackberries, um, wild rose, and modern cultivar rose. So that would be quite an interesting experiment,
Yes, I think it would be.
wouldn't it? Quite
Something.
a good experiment.
This is something either I will do or I will find somebody
You
else
can't do it
to do
out.
for me.
Yeah, I mean, what you could do if you had a large enough sealed unit with some sort of metal mesh on top for allowing air to flow, you could plant four of these plants in the bottom an upright sort of terrarium type of a job. The ones I've just said, all four of those, get them growing in there with the light, and get the humidity just right. And then when they're all doing well in the same environment, then introduce the stick insects and see which ones they gravitate to.
That's a
That
really
would probably
good
be the
idea.
easiest way to do it.
Very
Hmm.
good idea. I think I will do just
Hmm.
that. Moving on, I have good news
Hmm.
for you. Look at that. That is a
Hmm.
high brand fritillary, which until recently was nearly extinct in Britain. In southwest England,
Right.
61% of colonies have been lost, and the Hedon Valley in Exmoor is one of only
Crikey.
two remaining strongholds in the region. They urgently need protecting.
Is it
But, sorry,
is it because of is it because of the loss of hedgerows?
they're trying to find out. I personally think it's going to be pesticides as much as hedgerows, but the
Right.
butterfly
Right.
conservation have identified a string of national trust sites where new colonies could be established, allowing the butterfly to spread west to east. This conservation action must happen now before it's
Fabulous.
too late. Well, I think that's really, really good news.
Mm.
And whilst on the subject
So do
of
I.
fritillaries, here's another fritillary, and it's another West Country fritillary. That is the small pearl, I can never say this, the small pearl bordered fritillary. You try and say that if you've had a few, and I haven't had a few.
Yes.
They are found in various parts of the West Country, but the colonies are all isolated. And this is another butterfly conservation project to provide corridors so the colonies can become linked. And this is particularly important to stop genetic bottlenecking in the isolated colonies. So, which means the isolated colonies aren't going to.
I suppose the other way of doing it would be to go to map out the colonies and then go to each colony and collect a number of caterpillars in jars and then take them to another colony and place them on food plants that don't already have caterpillars on them.
Yes,
in order to mix
no.
up the genes that way, you could do that, I suppose.
Yes and no, because if your hypothetical colony that they took the caterpillars from is infested by ichneumon wasps or one of the viral diseases that attack caterpillars, which aren't noticeable until the caterpillars are nearly at full term and then get killed and eaten alive, then you could be introducing pests and viruses. What's the plural of viruses? Virae? Oh, viruses will do.
In that case, I would. I mean, in that situation, if I were that society, if I were that organization, I would establish a place of sort of a large greenhouse with sections for each for different colonies of different species, collect live butterflies from the areas where they're endangered, put them into their own little area with their own food plants, let them mate where ichneumon wasps can't get at them, and then you've got a sort of a breeding colony that's going to keep going for years and years and years. You could take caterpillars from and know that they're not going to hatch out pests that are going to eat them.
I'm afraid captive breeding is probably, as you say, the answer. But I applaud the wildlife corridors idea because it does mean there can be free flow of all sorts of different animals from one area of wild wilderness to another area, which always works out for the best. And now we have, first of all, become a trustee of butterfly conservation. It's something I've often considered, and one of these days, you never know, I might even get round to it. Now, this is something I feel is massively important. It's called The Power of Nature, and it's an article about how important being able to commune with the natural world is for kids growing up. Because so many kids these days live in inner cities where there's a dearth of wildlife and spend all their time on their phones or their tablets. But butterfly conservation, through a program called Wild Spaces, are doing their best to get kids involved with the natural world, which I think is absolutely smashing. And they are fostering community wild spaces in cities for kids to get involved with, for kids to do the things that you and I did in the country when we were kids. Yeah, fabulous. There's nothing you can say about that that's even slightly disparaging. I think it's a brilliant idea. And I think that this is wonderful as well. At last, we are facing, everyone talks about the climate crisis, but we're facing the biodiversity crisis as species are becoming extinct hand over fist. And now the people who support butterflies and support the charity of butterfly conservation are taking to the streets. And as we have found in recent years,
Hurrah!
fortunately, as us old hippies always said back in the day, direct action is the only thing which bears results. So well done, lads. And now we have a headline: no green space is complete without butterflies and moths. And Butterfly Conservation are welcoming their new vice president, Dr. Amir Khan, who shares his hope for the charity's future and the important role of nature in all our lives. And isn't that a beautiful picture of a peacock? That's utterly gorgeous, I think.
Oh, that's lovely, yeah.
Now, what do we have? We have butterfly gardening. And there's an article here, including a very nice chrysalis of a small white, which are butterflies, again, I'm very fond of. And it's an article about what to do for gardening in the spring for encouraging butterflies. You've got an allotment, haven't you?
Oh, that's lovely. Well, I co-work an allotment with somebody whose allotment it is.
And are the butterflies up there?
Oh, we have lots of butterflies.
Well, I think that's important. I think
in allotment management, the better allotment management groups around the country, they always allow for a generous proportion between the actual allotment. Then you'll have what's known as a towpath, which is or a haulage way, which you can move vehicles up and down. Then you'll have like a thick bit of grass as a boundary to the hedge, and that will be managed specifically for things like ladybirds and butterflies and any insects which are gardeners' friends, really, including wasps.
Well, I think that's absolutely fantastic. And we move on to reintroductions and an article about the successful reintroduction of the checkered skipper to England, where it became extinct here in, I believe, 1976, and it's been successfully reintroduced. But the article says something which I agree with 150%, that whilst reintroduction programs done properly are fantastic things, the most important thing is to conserve the land that we still have and conserve the habitats we still have and help them grow and spread, which I think is absolutely important.
For that,
you can't say anything about it. Now, let's see, what else do we have?
But for that, all that you do need the right plants.
Because you're saying exactly what the next article says about finding the right plant.
Oh, okay.
For the health of an area, and they're planting them on motorway verges.
Yeah, if every farmer in the country set aside a patch of land that was, say, 10 meters by 10 meters, and sowed that 10 meters by 10 meters with all the food plants for these different types of butterflies, you'd be amazed at the difference it would make to the general population of butterflies. Just 10 meters by 10 meters. I mean, that's a drop in the ocean when it comes to the size of even a small holding, let alone a proper farm.
I'd go further than that. I think it's if every person with a garden just set aside a corner of their garden to go wild and have brambles and nettles and all the other food plants that insects love, it would be a magical thing. It would be an amazing thing. Because, as the next article, which I think is coming to the end, says, butterflies are important indicators of the overall health of our ecosystem. And you can't say fairer than that. Without butterflies, the ecosystem is in deep trouble. With butterflies and with the biggest biodiversity possible of butterflies, our ecosystems have a chance to rejuvenate. And that.
Well, they're second in pollination only to bees, aren't they, really?
Yeah, very much so. And that is the end of this issue 145, spring 2024, of the Butterfly Conservation Magazine. Anyway, we have 3 minutes left. So, Mr. McCrimmon.
Hurrah!
Hooray for things! And here we are at the end of another episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm going to be back with Mr. McCrinnan on Saturday. And what is going to be on Saturday? I wonder. Let me have a quick gander. I don't know. Let me have a look at my schedule. It's going to be
the Archers.
It's not going to be the Archers. It's going to be part 2 of our conversation with Vera Cardoso, who's a lovely lady all the way from Portugal. And so, Mr. McCrinnan, will you be joining us on Saturday for the second part of Vera's interview?
Well, I would jolly well. I hope so. And of course, if you're there presenting and I'm here watching, and we're watching together on YouTube as well, I'll be
seeing you. Ha ha! I got there. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, the only show on the internet where you can watch 2 elderly hippies talking hard science and doing.
I'm not Lee.
You're only a year younger than me, and I'm an old man.
You're not old.